Welcome to the Legalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Sager, and I'm dedicated to covering common legal issues for small business owners and just how some of the world's most elite entrepreneurs have handled legal issues themselves. In true attorney fashion, the information in this episode is not legal advice. This is for informational purposes only, and you should always consult with your attorney before implementing any of the information. Now, on to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Legalpreneur Podcast. Today's episode is jam-packed full of goodness for you and your legal mind. For those wanting to hear from other entrepreneurs that have encountered legal issues, this is an episode for you because Chelsea, today's guest, had a photo stolen and put up on a billboard. A billboard. I know it's crazy the things that happen to entrepreneurs, but make sure that you are not the person putting up a photo on a billboard. Chelsea Klevesahl is a creative director and marketing strategist. She has had her work featured in Fast Company, The One Show, The New York Times, and Adweek. If you are looking for a creative director or marketing strategist, Chelsea is the girl for you. I'm so excited for you to hear this show. Here we go. Hey, Chelsea. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am super pumped about this, and I know the listeners are as well. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So let's go ahead and get started. Just tell the audience a little bit about you, how you got to this point in your career.
Yeah, I am a creative director and marketing strategist. For the last probably 20 years, I've been working with advertising agencies full-time and have recently stepped out onto my own. So now I'm working for the agencies freelance, as well as working directly with businesses and founders to help level up their creative direction and their marketing strategy.
So did I hear you say that right? For the past 20 years?
Yeah, I got started extremely young.
Well, because if you look at your Instagram, you don't look like you've been doing anything for 20 years except for maybe just living.
Yeah. I lucked out. I started as a surgical technician and started doing the marketing for the clinic right out of high school and kind of evolved from there. This is basically all I've ever done.
Wow, that's really cool. So I'm curious, what exactly does a creative director do?
Yeah, a creative director is like the conductor of an orchestra. So I oversee all of the individual creatives on your marketing team, like your branding designer, your social media designer, website designer, the developer, the funnel builder. And it's my job to make sure that the output of all of these diverse creatives are on brand, executed to the quality standards of your brand, and are delivered to work and align with your marketing strategy, best practices, that you're really killing it on all levels without having anything that is slightly out of step. So you as a solopreneur or as a founder or even as a marketing director don't have to understand all of the intimate details that go into producing a photo shoot or all of the best practices in branding. You just have to rely on me to know that and do it for you.
That's really cool. I'm curious, since you spent 20 years as an employee, what was your experience, if any, with attorneys?
Oh, they were always the fun police. As a creative, it's our job to come up with something that's going to grab people's attention and that's outlandish or crazy or fun and entertaining. And a lot of times my interaction with legal was just them saying, no, you can't do that. It's going to water down the trademark of the brand, or you can't do that because we're concerned that these people will get upset. So it was never, a super positive relationship.
Right. Yeah. So I go through that as well with some of my clients, mainly those that are creating a lot of content. So one podcast network who's creating original content, we essentially have a process where they will send some of the content that they think might be questionable. I review it and I, give them feedback based on what the potential legal issues can be. So is that a similar process? You would kind of just send it over and say, hey, are we doing anything wrong here?
Yeah, pretty much. We work to sell an idea, and then once the marketing team buys it, you have to send it to legal for review. And oftentimes you're kind of sending it to its death.
It's unfortunate, but I mean, it's very necessary because I'm sure, did you ever see any lawsuits or any cease and desist letters, as an employee working for someone else? Did you ever get to see that side?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's really seen as a badge of honor that, like, hey, we got this through. And they were so polarized by it that they actually responded and got a cease and desist. There's actually a beer, and I'm pretty sure it's by Lagunitas Brewery, that's called cease and desist because their original name and marketing campaign for it was issued a C&D. So,
Wow, I had no idea about that. I nerd out about that stuff, so that's really cool to hear. So, when you started to go out on your own, did you start with that mindset of, okay, I've encountered these issues as an employee. I know I need to have an attorney do this or that for me? Or were you just like, nope, I'm, bootstrapping everything. I don't want to outsource anything. I'm just going to DIY everything.
no, it would have been more on the client's legal team. Just to cover myself, I would tell them you should run this past your legal, or have you done a trademark search for this and that sort of thing. It's not very often that I would take on any legal responsibility for their marketing. I would just be there in more of a guidance kind of role.
I love that. No, that's awesome. I actually try to work with similar creatives like you, a lot of website designers, anybody that's also designing for somebody else. I try to get with them to implement processes themselves to relieve them of liability because I've seen some crazy stuff where the client, I know for one web designer, her client tried to tell her, oh, you didn't tell me that this was covered by a trademark. And she's like, listen, you sent me your brand name. This is your like, I didn't do any of this for you. You can't hold me liable. So now I'm really working with a lot of designers and those in that creative space to implement those processes in order to make sure clients can't come back on them and say, it's your fault that I'm liable for this infringement or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really where I feel blessed to have had the agency experience where I know what to look for ahead of time and I can offer my clients that recommendation. I can't start a branding design or even a website design unless you secure a trademark on this brand, because it could end up being a waste of time and money for both of us in 9 months if you don't cover that off first, or especially working with photography and working with young designers that aren't familiar with how photo licensing works.
Yeah. We'll definitely get in that in a second. So you said about trademarks. Do you actually require your clients to have registered trademarks before working with you?
If it's a startup, yeah. Yeah. If we're just starting a brand new brand and they're putting lots of capital and in big investments behind it, yeah, there is no reason for them to be engaging in a branding project before we can secure that we can even use the name at all. That puts me in a position of spending lots of time and energy and resources creating something that may never see the light of day, or create a bad experience for them if they end up getting a C&D or they find out that they can't use that brand identity or that name after the fact. I don't want them to come back and blame me for not having told them that they should be doing that. So,
yeah, you are absolutely speaking my language, girlfriend. Like, I try to tell people all the time, because so many small businesses nowadays, whether they're solopreneur, startup, whatever, they're so excited about this idea and making money, which I completely understand. But I also try to help them understand this is your business and you may not necessarily have the rights to be conducting business in this way or with this branding, with this brand identity. I'm not going to say it's a challenge. Well, it is a challenge. As with anything in business, it can be a challenge. But that's what I've really been focusing on, is getting business owners to understand, yes, it's not an issue right now, but it's not an issue until it is. And then 6 months from now, when you receive that cease and desist letter or you get sued, you're going to wish you had taken care of it up front.
Yeah, I don't want to be in a position where a client feels like they don't have to pay me because their branding can't be used. It's no fun.
Yeah, exactly. So let's hear about your business and maybe where you have had to work with an attorney.
Yeah, well, right now I am trying to engage well, with you as my attorney as much as possible on anything that basically crosses my mind. Because I transitioned from, seeing the lawyers as the fun police to now it's essentially my bubble wrap. And, please protect me. Oh my God, can I use this as a freebie or can I lift this piece of material? But in the past, when I was working as a photographer, I didn't have the benefit of working with an attorney or having anything in writing with my clients. And that led me vulnerable to situations where I did end up having to engage an attorney at the last minute, which is never when you want to start that type of a relationship.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's never fun. Of course, from my end, I'm always, hey, be proactive about it. You want to, you want to do this ahead of time. You want to do this ahead of time. But sometimes you do have to be reactive. So yeah, can you give us more details about when you've had to be reactive?
Yeah, sure. I used to be a motorsports photographer. My husband and I ran a company where we shot motorcycle racing in town.
That's awesome.
It was so much fun. It was such a small niche, and our audience was so small that we never felt the need to really get super granular with contracts with the organizations and all that sort of stuff, because we had pretty well, blanket talent releases and location releases for everything that we were shooting, until one day we were driving up to the racetrack and saw a billboard with our photograph on it, knowing full well that we had never licensed or approved use of our photo on the billboard. So we ended up having to track them down and get really, really granular and specific about who can use our photos and why this person wasn't allowed to, even though they were tangentially involved in the organization that we were shooting for. So, I mean, luckily I was working at an agency full time at the time. So I had access to a lot of really great art buyers and the agency attorneys to look at lifting legal language for image licensing, for rights managed and limited use and all that sort of stuff. So I had to write up this whole contract myself and then hire a lawyer to essentially bless it. Any advice or, what am I missing here? And then and retroactively have our client sign it and engage in a conversation with this other party and why this doesn't extend to them and what they can use any photographs for and how they have to go about it. So it was an extremely sudden and tough situation to navigate. I innately knew these sort of laws and rules myself, because it was what I do professionally, but suddenly being smacked with the reality that nobody has any idea what image licensing is was tough. It was a tough month.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And honestly, like I'm dealing with clients that either do that or have that happen to them every single day. And I want to dive a little deeper into photo licensing because it's such an important topic, especially for entrepreneurs and small businesses today. So you said this photo was used on a billboard, like an actual, like humongous billboard that you see driving down the highway.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh my, like that is there for literally everybody to see.
Yeah.
So first I want to ask, did the photo get removed or did they pay you for a license?
Yeah, it was really delicate because it was the track that the racing organization rented to host the events that they hired us to shoot. And we were contracted as the official photographers. We were the only ones able to shoot these races. And I was acting on their board of directors as the director of marketing. So there was really no need for any contract telling me what I could do with my own photos. But they were trying to promote the organization and the races at their track. It wasn't ideal in how it went about it, but we ended up writing the contract to retroactively give them license for using the photograph to promote this organization and then stipulating moving forward what the rules would be. Like they have to ask us to use these photographs because in everybody's best interest, I mean, the photo was low res. I mean, it wasn't the right resolution to be printed at that size. So it wasn't giving a really great brand impression for the racing organization or for ourselves or for the track. So it was more around getting them to understand how we need to work together in order to make sure that everybody's branding is intact and we're not trying to entice people to come to an event with a crappy low-res photo. So there wasn't any money exchanged in that instance, but we did give them a rate sheet for any other materials if they were going to be using it to promote the track itself outside of this specific organization. Because the racing organization we were working for was a nonprofit. Racing is expensive and you don't want to dumb down the event by having to push money towards marketing. So it wasn't ever as important to have any money exchanging hands, rather just that education and firming up those expectations of this is what we expect and this is the respect that we want if you want to use our photos, and we want to help you to do that and help you promote your business. But here are the ways in which you are allowed to do it. And here are the costs if you want to do it in a different way.
Oh man, I can only imagine how hard that was for you. But I totally understand like the small niche thing. So I'm actually a bowler. I went to college for bowling and I bowl now, and I guess now it's public knowledge, but I am in the process of creating a app for the bowling industry. And that's definitely been one of the considerations because bowling is also an expensive sport, not as expensive as any motorsports, but you have to be very careful about how much you're charging. And so I totally get like if it would have been, something for the baseball or football industry, you probably would have made them pay some money because obviously there's a lot more money in those industries. So I want to get into the photo licensing because I work with a lot of businesses who, number one, I used to own a clothing boutique, and with your clothing boutique, typically you have a photographer on retainer photographing new arrivals and all that fun stuff to hurry up and get on your website. Well, with a lot of boutique owners, they don't understand their rights with the photos. I have seen business owners say, "Oh, my photographer is using these photos for her own purpose, but I paid her, to create them for me." And I have to go in and clarify, listen, the only thing you paid for was a license to use that photo. That photographer only gave you permission to use her photos. It is her work. It is her copyrighted work. And you only have permission to use it. So yes, your photographer can use those photos for whatever they want unless they assign you all of the rights. So you have to know the difference between a license and an assignment. So a license is essentially just permission. You have permission to use the photo. So if you find, this photo on Instagram or Pinterest and you think it's, the best picture in the world, you want to use it for your business, all you have to do is message the owner of the photo. And number one, you have to make sure you know who the owner is. Number two, message them and say, "Hey, I love this photo. I'd love to use it for this purpose. Can I use it?" If they say yes, great, you can use it. If they say no, then if you use it, that's copyright infringement. And sometimes they may say, yes, go ahead. Or they may say, yeah, here's the fee to use that photo. And that just means they're giving you a license and you have to pay money for it. Sometimes they give you a free license. Sometimes they make you pay for the license. So this is something that I preach all of the time is do not go out and just use any photo that you find online, on Pinterest, on Google, on Instagram. Now, there is a little murky water around Instagram with the Regram app. So like if you use the Regram app and you're using it within the Instagram app, like you're just regramming it on Instagram, that is not infringement because that is okay with the Instagram terms of use. And by both parties using Instagram, it's not infringement. Same with adding to stories and all this and that. However, if you either regram or screenshot it and use it as your own, that's a completely different story. And that is probably copyright infringement. So next time you hire a photographer, make sure that you are aware that you are only paying for a license to use those photos. Your photographer can do what they want with that license. Now, I've worked with some photographers who work with high-end clients, and the high-end clients don't want the photographer advertising with their photos or whatever. But of course, that client's going to be paying a premium for it. So if you want to be assigned the actual rights to the photo, you will be paying a premium, sometimes 5-10 times more than what you would be paying just to get the license for the photo, because the photographer is putting in this work to create the photos. They should be able to use their work how they please, whether they want to use it in their portfolio, whether they want to use it to show on their website or wherever.
That's how they get more work.
Exactly. So I'm glad that you've been able to share this with us, because it's something that a lot of people don't understand. And with your situation, I see how that was even muddier, because they had that party who used the photo. They actually hired you, right?
No, it's so incestuous. It was the racetrack leased the track to the racing organization, and the racing organization hired us.
Okay. That makes sense. And you can see how it all gets confusing.
Yeah.
And this is why if you're licensing photos, you absolutely need an attorney reviewing your contracts, because you need to know what rights you do and don't have, because Chelsea could have easily asked for a settlement payment, or she could have easily sued for copyright infringement. So luckily she just charged them for feature photos and things like that. But it's important as a small business owner to know what you have rights to do and what you don't have rights to do.
Yeah, I would even dig deeper into like the rights managed images and say it can get as granular as you can buy a license to use an image, but that license may only cover use on social media once on a specific platform, or the price of that image would be varied dependent on how you're going to use it. So if they could charge you one price to use it on a billboard and an entirely different price, more or less, to use it in a national magazine on a full page ad where the image is 1/4 of the ad and it's going to be seen by 500,000 people. When you get into the nitty gritty of image licensing, it can get extremely granular and your price can go through the roof the more you want to use it. So if you're able to work with a photographer that will give you a blanket license to use it in like a rights managed kind of way, or royalty free, essentially, it's a huge value. You're saving so much money compared to just buying stock or trying to pull something off Google, or risking being sued for copyright infringement from using an image that you don't have a license to. I think people kind of see photography as it's everywhere. We can just, Google image search. It's become such a commodity that photographers are really kind of getting the short end of the paycheck, because people think that it's so easily available. And there are so many wonderful, amazing photographers out there that are so accessible now on Instagram or anywhere that your other entrepreneur friends are using. Like it's such a value add to your brand to have that branded photography, rather than risking something or trying to cheap out buying, a $33 stock image.
Yeah, exactly. And the stock images, you have to be so careful about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm doing another episode specifically on stock images, because there's a whole episode about that and about licenses, because I get asked all the time about Canva licenses. There are different licenses to Canva images, Canva works. So you have to make sure that you know what you're purchasing. You have to make sure you know what you can and cannot do with the license that you're purchasing. So these are just all things that you have to think about as a small business owner. I know you're probably rolling your eyes right now, like, gosh, this is another thing I have to worry about. But just be grateful that you're learning about it now, and not when you get a cease and desist letter. And honestly, like I have people reach out and ask, hey, is this real? This seems like a scam. They get a cease and desist letter. I'm like, no, that is 100% real. And they can 100% sue you for that. And one other thing really quickly is, if you have other people working for you, whether they're employees or independent contractors, if you're hosting their work on your site or hosting it wherever on your site, on your social media, whatever, if their work, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a photo that they provide you with, you could be held liable for their infringement. Even though they provide you with the photo, you could be held liable for that. So make sure you're aware, if you're working with other parties, if they're an independent contractor, if they're an employee, you need to still make sure that everything that you are representing on your website, on your social media, it is all clear of infringement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had clients where I've come in to kind of audit all of their work and had to break it to them that they had to take down every single image on their website. They didn't have the license for any of the images on their whole website. It was really heartbreaking.
That's crazy. Gosh, I'm not going to say it's a tough place to be as a small business owner, because today it's easier than ever to make money, with your own business, but you have to make sure that you are protecting yourself and your brand. Even though you're making money with your side hustle, with your business, you have to make sure that you're doing everything you can to protect that money and not be at risk of losing it all. Okay, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but okay, so can you give us one tip? It can be, a business tip that you like to give people, or, something, a legal tip. I just like to give the listeners one good tip to be aware of.
Gosh, keeping on theme, I would say make sure that all of your photography is licensed appropriately. The things when it comes to marketing in a small business is trying to find inexpensive design talent to help you design your website or your social media work, and making sure that those designers aren't cutting the cost of purchasing the photography is really important, and looking through that scope of work and making sure that they are identifying that any photography or fonts licensing are not included in their cost. So that's one tip, to always read the scope. And if it does not itemize stock photography and font licensing as being in addition to their costs, then they may not know that that is even a thing, and they may not be purchasing the photography used in your designs. So there you go.
No, that's a great tip. I love that, because you're right. A lot of designers don't know about licensing, and it baffles me. Like, how are you doing business the way you're doing it without proper licensing?
People don't know what they don't know, and I admire their gusto and just going after it. But as a business owner, you have to protect yourself. So when reading a scope from a designer, make sure that they are listing that stock photography costs are extra.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to add before we get into your amazing giveaway?
I think we have covered so much about stock licensing that I'm just excited to hear your whole episode on
it. Yeah, awesome. So Chelsea has an amazing giveaway. Go ahead and let them in on your giveaway.
Yeah, I would love to offer your audience an opportunity to schedule a free 30-minute creative audit of any of your marketing materials with me. So we can take a look at your brand identity, your website, your landing pages, and really make sure that everything that you are putting out there for your brand and your business is up to best practices and up to spec with the brand strategy that you are going after.
That's amazing. So how can they win this giveaway?
Screenshot the podcast that you're listening to, post it in your stories, and tag Andrea and I.
Perfect. Yeah. So this is going to be an amazing giveaway, because basically, as long as you screenshot this episode, share it to your stories, and tag us, then you will get this free 30-minute audit. So make sure you tag me at Andrea Sager Law and tag Chelsea at CKLev.creative. Don't worry, I will tag everything in the show notes. I'm very grateful for you, Chelsea, and I'm so thankful that you're providing this to the listeners, because I know that a lot of business owners are listening right now and probably thinking about all of the photos that are currently on their social media or website that they need to remove ASAP. But at least you're learning about it now. I always tell clients that either have to rebrand or have to get that cease and desist letter. I tell them, look, just be thankful it's happening now, and not when you're a much bigger brand and making more money. Just be grateful that it's happening now.
Yeah, it's a learning opportunity.
Exactly.
An expensive one.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your licensing genius.
No, this has been so great. I love chatting with you.
Yeah, you too. That is it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. If you found this information helpful, I would be so grateful if you could share it with a fellow business owner. And it doesn't cost anything to rate, review, or subscribe to the show. Your support helps me reach more listeners, which allows me to support more business owners in their entrepreneurial journey. I'll see you next episode.